The story begins as the female lead anxiously glances at her watch, her heart racing as she stands in front of the old building. Today was the day she hoped to bring some sunshine back into the life of someone who had once been her closest friend. Years ago, they had sat together at the grave of Yu's beloved pet, a moment etched in her memory. She could still see the pain in his eyes, the way he had vowed to become a veterinarian so she would never have to grieve over a lost pet again. When he had shared his dream, she had looked at him, puzzled at first, but then a smile broke across her face, and she hugged him tightly, feeling warmth and hope radiate between them. Those moments had been the foundation of their friendship. Playful afternoons, late-night study sessions, and the thrill of impressing their teachers with top marks. But then, life had taken a turn. She had dropped the bombshell. She was switching schools. The memory of that day at the train station was vivid. She had seen the sadness in his eyes as he managed to put on a brave smile, waving goodbye as she disappeared into the distance. As she left, she couldn't shake the feeling of longing that had settled in her heart, wondering if he would be okay without her. Years later, Yu sat slumped in his chair, absent-mindedly tugging at a worn page in his notebook, lost in distant memories. The classroom buzzed around him, but he felt like a ghost, invisible to everyone. A classmate snapped at him for neglecting his cleaning duty, but his confused mind didn't register the reprimand. Frustrated, the boy yelled again, ordering him to wipe the whiteboard. Startled, Yu jumped up, stammering apologies as laughter erupted from his classmates, a cruel symphony that echoed in his ears. As he rose, he noticed the cruel messages scrawled across his desk, remnants of the bullying that had become a part of his daily life. Each word felt like a weight on his chest, suffocating him. During school breaks, he walked down the corridor, reciting motivational lines from his notes, trying to drown out the mocking laughter that chipped away at his resolve. Opening his assigned school cubby, his heart sank. His classmates had emptied their trash inside, a cruel reminder of their disdain. He forced himself to see progress, reminding himself that things were still better than in middle school. Holding on to his dream of becoming a veterinarian, he pushed forward, clinging to the hope that one day he would make a difference. On the train ride home, a sense of relief washed over him as he checked his previous result sheet. His best performance yet. Just as he felt a flicker of hope, a message from his mother pinged on his phone, asking him to buy dinner for the family. He hurried to complete the task, but a sense of dread lingered in his chest. His mother's temper was unpredictable, and he braced himself for the worst. When he arrived home, his sister greeted him with a bright smile, but the sight of the house overflowing with trash made his anxiety spike. His mother, looking disheveled with messy hair, sat glued to her phone, lost in her own world. At the dining table, he ate quickly, wanting to finish so he could focus on his math homework. But before he could gather his thoughts, his mother suddenly questioned him about his frustration. Without waiting for his response, Yu's mother snapped, her voice sharp and filled with frustration. "You think I don't have enough on my plate? You're just blaming me for everything." Overwhelmed with sadness and frustration, Yu tried to explain himself, but his mother refused to listen. She continued scolding him, convinced that he was judging her. With a sharp thud, she slammed her hands on the table and stood abruptly, her disheveled hair falling over her face as she yelled. "I'm running to the hospital, taking multiple medications, juggling a part-time job, and all I get is reprimanded by Yamamoto-san and Nozaki-san." Turning back to him, she lashed out again, her voice rising. "You think your life is hard? All you have to do is attend school without a single real worry." In a fit of rage, she threw the dishes aside, furiously blaming him for ruining her appetite. Stunned and overwhelmed, Yu stammered apology after apology, even blaming himself for making her so angry. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he held them back, fighting against the tide of despair. He retreated to his room, shutting the door behind him, and sank to the ground, burying his face in his hands. Exhausted and drained, he gripped his head, trying to process the chaos that had just unfolded. After a deep breath, he forced himself to stand, determined to focus on his math homework. With newfound resolve, he moved toward his study table. As he switched on the light, his gaze fell on childhood pictures with his friends, and among them was a soft, smiling image of Yatsuha. A wave of disappointment washed over him as he remembered the happiness they once shared, a stark contrast to the turmoil of his life now. Trying to concentrate on his math, his mind kept drifting back to the bullies at school and his mother's terrifying temper. Yet, despite the weight of it all, a small smile appeared as he thought of Yatsuha's innocent childhood face and the promise they had made to get into Hokushin National University together and become veterinarians. Just thinking about her gave him strength. No matter how painful life became, no matter how much others tormented him, even if the world itself wanted him gone, he decided to stay alive. If not for himself, then at least for her. But as he struggled to hold on, the crushing weight of his situation made him question everything. He began blaming himself, scolding his own existence, and doubting if Yatsuha had ever been a real reason to stay alive or just an excuse. With his hands gripping his head, the voices of depression urged him toward a darker path. In his mind, he envisioned Yatsuha, no longer the kind, innocent friend he remembered, but a cold, angry figure. She looked at him with disappointment, showing no interest in his dream of becoming a veterinarian. Instead, she scolded him, echoing the same cruel words that tormented him daily, urging him to end it all. The vision was so intense that, in desperation, he covered his ears, begging her and his thoughts to stop. But the overwhelming darkness didn't fade. His hands trembled as he set his pen down, convinced that even Yatsuha wanted him gone. In that crushing moment, he made his final decision. But just then, something strange happened. With her childish smile and a slight blush on her face, Yatsuha pulled the curtain aside and greeted him, her voice bright and cheerful. Lost deep in his thoughts, Yu looked completely confused, struggling to comprehend this unbelievable situation. As soon as he recognized her, his face remained frozen in shock. Noticing his bewildered expression, Yatsuha sighed in irritation. "Didn't you get my letter? I mentioned I'd be seeing you very soon." She excitedly revealed that she had transferred back to his school just a short while ago. With great confusion and disbelief, Yu immediately moved closer to the window, where Yatsuha stood outside on the second-floor ledge. Shocked, he stared at her, unable to process the situation unfolding before him. Beaming with excitement, Yatsuha happily admitted that she just wanted to meet him as quickly as possible. She pointed toward the building next door and explained that she had jumped directly to his window because it was the shortest path. Hearing this reckless explanation, Yu's heart raced with concern. He quickly grabbed her and pulled her inside, wrapping his arms around her in a protective hug. Feeling his warmth after so long, Yatsuha blushed, her heart swelling with happiness. But just as suddenly, he pulled away, leaving her confused. In his mind, the vision of her cold, scolding face still lingered, urging him to give up. Anxiety and depression crept back in, twisting reality around him. And he struggled to reconcile the warmth of her presence with the darkness that had clouded his thoughts. His spiraling thoughts were interrupted when she excitedly offered him a pack of chips as a moving gift. When he looked at her in confusion, she cheerfully explained that they might be a little crushed, since she had accidentally squished them between her ankle and the wall while jumping. But she assured him they still tasted just as good. With determination, she tried to open the chip pack, not embarrassed but smiling brightly, deciding not to make a mess in his room. She sat down and continued her efforts, focused on opening it. Seeing her struggle, Yu, still in disbelief, took the pack from her and effortlessly opened it. A burst of excitement lit up her face as she thanked him for his cleverness. As she took a chip and popped it into her mouth, she thanked him again for making sure no chips went to waste. Then, with a playful grin, she invited him to take a bite. As he took one, his mind began to drift again. But Yatsuha, holding 2 chips at once and placing them in her mouth, called for his attention. When he looked at her, the sight of the 2 chips in her mouth made him smile for the first time. The way it made her look like a little duck was undeniably cute, just as she had wanted to make him smile. Suddenly, she rushed toward his desk, her excitement palpable as she grabbed his veterinary medicine books with glowing enthusiasm. She looked at him, and he, still confused, watched her closely. Without warning, she rushed back to him and hugged him tightly, confessing her love for him and admiring his unwavering passion to become an animal doctor, even after all these years. Realizing the depth of her love and affection, Yu finally came to terms with the fact that he had lost sight of his own dreams. He gently held her hand, admiring her kindness, cuteness, and loving nature. His hand softly rested on her cheek, a tender gesture full of warmth. As she confessed her love again, her words stirred something deep within him. Overcome with emotion, tears filled his eyes, and he pulled her into another hug, this time with even more affection. He felt an immense sense of gratitude that he hadn't given up on life, despite the overwhelming struggles. Understanding his pain, Yatsuha gently tapped on his head as if comforting a child, and promised him that everything would be all right. After some time, he apologized to her, feeling incredibly sleepy. With a smile, she agreed to go home. As they climbed the stairs and walked through the living room, she unexpectedly apologized to his mother for interrupting her, leaving her completely baffled. Just then, Yu handed over his shoes to Yatsuha, and his sister suddenly showed up, looking totally dumbfounded. When Yatsuha greeted her warmly, their father returned home, and the entire family was left puzzled by her unexpected visit, giving her confused looks. But Yatsuha, undeterred, beamed brightly and waved at everyone, hoping to see them again. However, as she gazed outward, her demeanor shifted from warm to icy in an instant. She addressed everyone, his family, the bullies, and the shadows of Yu's past, blaming them for pushing him to the brink. Yu walked beside her, wondering what she was on about. When Yatsuha turned back to Yu, her mood shifted back to sweet, her loving smile illuminating the room. "I vow to conquer the dark fate that haunts you," she declared, her voice filled with determination. As she bid him farewell, she thanked him for the walk home and expressed her excitement for their next meeting. As she left, Yu lay down on his bed, still torn and unsure whether to feel happy or not. At school, everyone had once been kind to him, but behind his back, they mocked him, calling him awkward. No one ever wanted to sit with him, labeling him as boring. Now, with the thought that Yatsuha might also change into one of those cold people who once wished him dead, he felt a deep sense of fear and sadness. Gripping his blanket tightly, he sank deeper into despair, tears filling his eyes. His thoughts spiraled, changing direction every few seconds, and finally, overwhelmed by the weight of everything, he fell asleep, still crying. At almost 4 a.m., he woke up to Yatsuha's blushing face and cheerful greeting. Confused by her sudden presence in his room, he blinked in disbelief. She excitedly admitted to sneaking in through the window again. As he struggled to process the situation, he was shocked to find her perched on top of him. She laughed playfully, leaning in closer, and said she just wanted to be with him. Startled, she quickly moved away, wondering if she might be too heavy. Now lying beside him with a flushed face, she placed her hand on him, happily expressing her joy at seeing him again that morning. Still lost in confusion, Yu stared at her, but when he finally noticed her school uniform, excitement took over. "You're joining my school?" he exclaimed, his heart racing. "Yes, let's go to school together," she said eagerly, grabbing his hand and bouncing with enthusiasm about spending the whole day with him. As he got ready to change, she shyly stepped out of the room, her face flushed. When he emerged in his uniform, she gazed at him with an emotional, blushing expression, admiring how cool he looked. Before he could respond, she hugged him tightly, overflowing with love. Though he was still wary of her sudden change, he blushed, deciding to cherish the moment until she eventually returned to her colder self. Stealing a glance at his own innocent, flustered face, he felt both scared and worried when his mother suddenly appeared at the top of the stairs. Her hair waved wildly around her face like a ghost, and she seemed to be hiding something in her hand. The moment she noticed Yatsuha in their home, she scolded her for visiting every day and ordered her to leave, claiming she had an important conversation with her son. Before Yatsuha could respond, she was pushed away. But instead of getting angry, she simply headed downstairs with a secretive smile, discreetly holding Yu's bag and cheerfully wishing to see him again soon. As she stepped out of the house, her cute and innocent expression shifted to a serious one, determined not to let his mother do anything wrong to her beloved Yu. Noticing the kitchen door slightly ajar, she cautiously stepped inside, her suspicions growing. The sight before her was unsettling, piles of trash and garbage scattered all around. Meanwhile, Yu's mother continued shouting at him, but Yatsuha calmly entered the kitchen, coldly lighting a piece of paper on the stove and watching it burn. Back in the room, Yu's mother, who had been secretly gripping a sharp knife, suddenly slashed her own hand. Blood spurted from the deep wound, yet instead of acknowledging the pain, she blamed Yu, accusing him of being responsible for her actions. "If you had just listened to me instead of running away, none of this would have happened," she cried out, her voice filled with a mix of anger and despair. Upon arriving in the kitchen, Yu stood there, confused, as the alarm blared loudly, but there was no fire in sight. Just then, Yatsuha peeked in, her expression innocent yet concerned. "What's with the alarm?" she sweetly asked. Still puzzled, Yu hesitantly dismissed it as a malfunction, letting out a small sigh of relief. Yatsuha suddenly brightened, holding out his bag and shoes, playfully insisting she had taken them by accident. It was obvious she had done it on purpose, but Yu remained bewildered and uneasy. She gently placed his shoes down and beamed at him cheerfully, suggesting they head to school together. Meanwhile, in his room, Yu's mother still clutched the blood-covered knife with her wounded hand. Her mind disturbed, she was determined to show him her pain, believing that this would stop him from abandoning her. But as she approached the table, her eyes fell on a burnt piece of paper. The family photograph, half burnt, where only Yu remained standing happily while she and her daughter faded into ashes. The sight shook her to the core, and overwhelmed, she staggered back before collapsing to the ground. On their way to school, Yatsuha remained cheerful, playfully moving around, while Yu, still uneasy, clutched his motivational card. Noticing her curiosity, he awkwardly admitted that reading it on the way was his habit. She immediately smiled and apologized playfully, but before he could even glance at a motivational quote for confidence, she suddenly hugged him, expressing her joy over his decision to become an animal doctor. With an excited grin, she teased him, saying he was doing it just to make her happy, and that he was free to choose any other path. But when he firmly stated that he truly wanted to be a veterinarian, she blushed and hugged him again, happily showing him a picture of her cute dog and gushing about how it played all the time. Though walking with her made him feel lighter, as they reached the train station, his anxiety crept back in. He gripped the straps of his bag tightly, dreading an encounter with the usual troublemakers. The moment Yatsuha noticed them, her cheerful face shifted, her expression turning ice cold and dangerously sharp. As they stepped onto the train, Yu froze in fear upon spotting three familiar figures, his former bullies from middle school. His hands trembled as he tried to make himself smaller, avoiding eye contact and hoping they wouldn't notice him. He silently reassured himself that they wouldn't bother him anymore, thinking they must have lost interest in him like an old toy. Maybe they'd just laugh a little and move on. However, the leader of the group suddenly noticed Yatsuha. His curiosity piqued. He nudged his friends, and they began making fun of Yu about his taste in girls. Yu, already hiding behind other passengers, felt his body grow weaker as memories flooded back. Times when they forced him to eat animals, mocked him endlessly, and even worse, when one of them wrapped a long cloth around his neck, pulling it tight under the excuse that his existence disgusted them. Just remembering it made him feel sick, his stomach turning as if he might vomit at any moment. Noticing his fear, Yatsuha glanced at him with a soft yet unreadable expression, her eyes filled with something deeper than concern. As the gang noticed Yu, they smirked and moved toward him with malicious intent, ready to harass him. But just as they closed in, they suddenly froze in shock. Yatsuha, blushing deeply, wrapped her arms around Yu with surprising affection. Yu stiffened, completely caught off guard, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. She looked up at him, still flustered, and without hesitation, slipped her hands inside his jacket. The gang stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend the situation. Before they could react, Yatsuha took it even further, offering for him to do the same. Yu hesitated, confusion clear on his face, but eventually, he followed along. As Yu placed his hands inside Yatsuha's warm embrace, a soothing warmth spread through him. Without realizing it, he relaxed and gently hugged her back. The gang remained frozen, struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. The leader finally snapped, stepping forward with an annoyed expression and shouting at Yu to stop showing off with such ridiculous behavior. But before he could do anything, Yatsuha, sensing Yu's discomfort and noticing the train approaching the next stop, cheerfully suggested they leave. Without hesitation, she took his hand, and they quickly exited the train together, leaving the stunned gang behind. As the gang noticed them leaving, they quickly followed. The leader smirked, pulling out his phone, eager to show Yatsuha a humiliating video of Yu, one he had recorded while tormenting him. With the phone in hand, he moved toward them, determined to make Yu's life miserable once again. Still holding Yatsuha's hand, Yu walked quickly, unaware of the threat behind him. Just as the gang closed in, Yatsuha casually tossed a 100% free food pamphlet from her bag onto their path. Two of the leader's subordinates instinctively paused to check it, momentarily distracted. The leader, however, remained focused, pushing forward angrily as they approached the entrance of the fifth gate. Yatsuha received a message from a friend mentioning loud noises nearby. Thinking fast, she pulled a newly purchased textbook from her bag as an excuse, but instead she intentionally dropped a fluffy teddy bear toy, acting surprised. She excitedly picked it up and eagerly showed it to Yu, stopping right in front of the fifth gate entrance. Yu looked at her, confused, unable to grasp her intention. Without a word, Yatsuha suddenly crouched down and carefully placed the small teddy toy just a centimeter away from the deep train tracks. At that moment, the gang leader stormed toward them, shouting in frustration. His loud voice made Yu shiver with fear, but Yatsuha remained unfazed, her expression turning cold. As the leader neared, he started mocking Yu, taunting him for avoiding him for so long. Meanwhile, Yatsuha observed the scene, noting that the leader unknowingly stood just a few centimeters from the toy truck. As the gang leader shouted at Yu, he suddenly hugged Yatsuha tightly, his voice trembling as he pleaded with the bully not to harm her, insisting she had nothing to do with any of this. The leader, now even more irritated, scolded Yu loudly, hurling insults while still holding Yu. Yatsuha discreetly peeked at her friend, who was waiting for her response, and on her signal, she sprinted off to alert the station staff, without hesitation. Meanwhile, the bully continued berating Yu, but Yatsuha, playing along with her plan, teased him with a smirk, mocking him for being jealous of Yu. Her words hit a nerve, and his frustration escalated. But she didn't stop grinning. She praised Yu's talent, his kindness, and even his cuteness, emphasizing that these must be the reasons for the bully's jealousy. Yu panicked, gripped her shoulders, his face tense with fear as he desperately tried to stop her. But it was too late. Her playful remarks pushed the bully over the edge. Enraged, he yelled that he wasn't jealous and, in a burst of fury, leaped toward Yu, phone in hand, ready to strike. At that exact moment, his foot landed directly on the teddy bear toy Yatsuha had carefully placed earlier. Losing his balance, he stumbled backward, falling straight onto the train tracks. His phone slipped from his grasp, landing beside him. Right then, the station speakers announced the train's arrival, urging passengers to step back just as the train sped toward the tracks. Panic spread through the station, and even the driver looked alarmed. At that moment, Yatsuha's friend rushed in with the station staff, urgently pointing toward the fallen bully. A staff member immediately yelled at him to move toward the platform. In sheer terror, the bully scrambled along the tracks, crawling as fast as he could. Just as he pulled himself away, the train rushed past, narrowly missing him. Though he survived, he was left panting heavily, his face pale with shock. Meanwhile, his phone lay on the tracks, completely crushed under the train's wheels. A crowd quickly gathered, including his two lackeys, who arrived with confusion, demanding to know what had just happened. Seizing the moment, Yatsuha dramatically clung to Yu's coat, pretending to be absolutely terrified. With wide, innocent eyes, she insisted she had no idea how any of this happened. As the station announcement informed everyone that the train would be briefly stopped for a track inspection, the station inspector moved toward the tracks. Murmurs of fear and shock spread among the onlookers. Yu, still confused and shaken, tried to process everything. Yat stood quietly behind him, appearing nervous, but in reality, she was completely calm. Meanwhile, the bully's two friends stood beside the station's staff, anxiously watching as the bully, still trembling, slowly climbed up from the tracks. His face was pale, his breathing heavy, and tears filled his eyes. His friends rushed to his side, concerned, but he barely heard them. The near-death experience replayed in his mind how he had always tormented Yu, telling him to die. Now, after coming so close to death himself, an overwhelming fear gripped him. Yu watched in surprise. For so long, this guy had terrorized him, making him tremble in fear. But now, seeing him in such a broken, terrified state, Yu, despite everything, couldn't help but feel sorry for him. At the same time, Kazuya's eyes widened as he noticed a masked woman in the crowd. Heighten, a well-known streamer. She was live-streaming the entire scene, her camera focused on the bully's tear-streaked face. With a playful yet mocking tone, she told her viewers how this jealous guy had tried to attack a couple, but ended up tripping himself straight onto the train tracks. She laughed, making the situation even more humiliating for him. Although today's stream was supposed to be about something entirely different, she had received a mysterious message earlier that morning, clearly sent by Yatsuha. Seizing the chance, she arrived just in time to film Kazuya boarding the train after a night with the girl he was cheating with. However, she captured something even more interesting. Noticing the camera, the bully erupted in anger, lunging forward to grab her collar and demanding she stop recording. But it was too late. Her live stream was already broadcasting his meltdown to countless viewers. His friends panicked, frantically trying to defuse the situation. Meanwhile, Yatsuha, completely unfazed, excitedly took Yu's hand and cheerfully led him out of the station. As they stepped onto the escalator, Yu, still holding her hand, trembled slightly but felt something different this time. For the first time ever, he wasn't scared. He clenched his fist, silently motivating himself, seeing himself finally free of fear. Yatsuha's face flushed with happiness, her excitement growing as she watched him take this step forward with newfound confidence. Meanwhile, the live stream continued, capturing the chaos at the station. The staff grabbed the bully by the collar as he lashed out after harassing the streamer. Viewers flooded the chat with anger, scolding him harshly. Some called out his disgusting behavior, while others started identifying his friends and directing their outrage toward them as well. On the way back to school, Yu's thoughts drifted to the past. He remembered how Ido had been the reason he was relentlessly bullied, not just by his middle school classmates, but even in high school. What always confused him was why his new classmates, who knew nothing about him, also turned against him from day one. His assigned desk had already been vandalized with cruel messages filled with insults, heartbreak, and depression-inducing words. The moment he stepped into class, everyone treated him with disdain, throwing harsh words his way, deepening his isolation and despair. His thoughts were interrupted by Yatsuha's cheerful voice as she excitedly pointed to a patch of clovers growing nearby. With a bright smile, she picked one up, carefully plucking a petal and tying it around his finger like a ring. Her face flushed with happiness as she playfully claimed that just like this flower, she would bring joy into his life. Yu stared at the petal with confusion, still processing her words. Meanwhile, Yatsuha twirled around happily, declaring with absolute confidence that she would erase all his bad memories and fill his life with happiness. Just as he repeated her words, she froze for a moment, realizing she might have revealed too much. Quickly, she hid her clover-shaped watch. Guys, this watch looks really nice. I guess manga artist was thinking about his ex. Hey wait, how do I know that artist was male? Whatever he or she, just comment down below. Do you like it, or it's only me? Let's continue our story. She hid her clover-shaped watch, and with an exaggeratedly cheerful expression, insisted that she was only talking about bringing fun into his life and guaranteed good results along the way. As they entered the school, Yu still felt scared and deeply depressed, especially with Yatsuha heading toward the office to handle her transfer paperwork. Struggling to walk with his drained energy, he barely managed to move. As expected, his locker was once again filled with garbage, making his already heavy heart sink further. With great difficulty, he made his way toward his classroom, near the restroom. A group of students noticed him and burst into laughter, mocking him and questioning him about his torn-apart, tossed books in the restroom. His eyes widened in despair as he watched his books sink into the water. Kneeling down, he hesitantly picked them up while his classmates continued to tease and laugh at him, their voices echoing in his ears. With a sad and deeply depressed face, he finally reached his classroom and sat down. As he opened his locker, the petal ring, the one Yatsuha had tied around his finger that morning, tore apart, the delicate petal drifting down and falling onto his desk. His heart tightened painfully, remembering how she had happily assured him that this would bring happiness. When the school bell rang, the entire class was left in shock as Yatsuha entered with a bright smile, cheerfully greeting everyone in a loud and lively voice. The room fell silent as curious eyes turned toward her, surprised by her confident and warm presence. Following the teacher's instructions, the class quieted down as she introduced herself. Instantly, admiration spread among the students. Her beauty, charm, and kindness made it obvious that she would make friends quickly. Meanwhile, Yu sat there, still lost in his gloom, watching the scene unfold with a distant expression. Then, out of nowhere, Yatsuha waved at him enthusiastically from across the room. The class murmured in confusion, but before anyone could react, she dashed toward him, her excitement evident, and shocked everyone by throwing her arms around him in a tight hug. The classroom erupted in whispers of disbelief, the bullies looking particularly stunned. Without hesitation, Yatsuha beamed and introduced him as her childhood friend, calling him the most precious and important person in her life, the one she admired the most. As the bullies exchanged glances, still processing what had just happened, Yatsuha noticed Yu's torn books on the desk. With a cheerful grin, she eagerly offered to share her book with him, knowing he wouldn't be able to read from the damaged pages. While other students eagerly tried to convince her to sit with them, she cheerfully ignored their requests and happily took a seat beside him, completely unbothered by their reactions. As she sat there, her gaze drifted to his hands. After a brief moment, she finally reached out and held his hand, leaving him utterly baffled. Flustered, he quickly apologized, mumbling an excuse about needing to focus on the lesson. But instead of letting go, Yatsuha simply rested her head on his shoulder, smiling contentedly. The entire class watched the scene unfold with simmering jealousy and irritation. During lunchtime, the situation only intensified. From the glass window, classmates glared at them as they sat together on a bench outside the classroom. To them, the sight was nothing short of infuriating. Meanwhile, a group of bad boys sat nearby, drinking and grumbling among themselves. One of them, clearly irritated, finally lost his patience and snapped at his friend for throwing Yu's books into the washroom earlier. His frustration stemmed from the fact that because of that prank, Yatsuha, a cute girl, ended up sitting with Yu instead. However, his friend, unfazed by his anger, casually shrugged and told him to confront Yu directly if he had a problem. Watching from the window, one suspicious guy seethed with jealousy. He didn't just want Yu humiliated, he wanted Yatsuha for himself. His grip tightened in frustration, and with barely contained rage, he dragged his nails against the glass, the sharp sound echoing his growing fury. After school on their way home, Yatsuha twirled and danced happily as she walked, her joy overflowing from spending the day with him. Yu, already bewildered by her boundless excitement, watched in confusion. Suddenly, she spun around and caught him staring, making him even more flustered. With a teasing glint in her eyes, she unexpectedly gushed over his cuteness. His face darkened with embarrassment as he tried to deny it, but Yatsuha, blushing, grabbed the collar of his coat and earnestly insisted that to her, he was the cutest person in the entire world. As they parted ways, she waved goodbye with a bright smile. Yu slowly opened the main door to his house, his expression still clouded with sadness. But the moment he stepped inside, he froze in shock. His mother stood there, her usual cold, eerie presence slightly softened by a faint, almost forced smile. In an unsettlingly calm tone, she informed him that she had bought his favorite dinner, something of his own choice. Yet, as she complained about the difficulty of going all the way to the supermarket alone, Yu quickly apologized, still trying to process her unusual behavior as he headed to his room to change. His mind swirled with confusion. His mother had never done anything like this before. So why now? That morning, before he had left for school, his mother had seen a half-burned photograph. All the faces in the picture had been scorched away except for Yu's, staring at it with a dark, intense expression. She had clenched her fists in frustration at the thought of him being the only one left. The fear of him abandoning her one day had consumed her. Now, sitting at the dinner table, Yu felt awkward and uneasy about his mother's sudden shift in behavior. But as soon as she called his name, a shiver ran down his spine. With a piercing gaze, she calmly asked if he was struggling at school, if he was facing mental stress, anxiety, or anything troubling. She assured him that if anything was wrong, he would be treated soon. For a split second, countless haunting memories flooded his mind. His classmates, cruel threats scratched onto his desk, his mother's past terrifying outbursts, and the horrifying sight of her cutting her own hand in front of him. But then, glancing at her unreadable expression, he realized something. No matter how bad things were for him, nothing compared to his mother's condition. So suppressing everything, he simply shook his head, claiming he was fine. Thinking about Yatsuha and her bright, cheerful face, he shared his day with his mother for no particular reason. But when he mentioned that just her presence made everything better, his mother's expression turned sad and concerned. Later, in his room after studying, he lay on his bed feeling motivated despite everything, just because she existed. But as he closed his eyes, the hateful, suffocating thoughts returned, whispering that he was despised, that he should just disappear. He tried to hold on to Yatsuha's presence as a lifeline, but the negativity overwhelmed him, screaming at him to end it all. Frustrated and anxious, he buried himself under the blanket until his phone buzzed with a message from Yatsuha, asking if she could call him. With teary eyes, he immediately answered. On the call, Yatsuha smiled brightly, sharing her excitement about seeing him tomorrow and admitting she was too happy to sleep. She then requested him to keep talking until she drifted off, playfully excusing that his voice helped her fall asleep faster. For the first time, Yu felt a little at ease, casually chatting with her. After a few minutes, he fell asleep, his phone still beside him. Once she confirmed he was asleep, Yatsuha softly whispered, "Sweet dreams," and ended the call, quietly confessing her love as she closed her eyes. In her dream, morning broke, and Yu appeared. Her face lit up until suddenly, she started crying, desperately begging him not to leave. But he kept walking away toward a twisted rope hanging from the ceiling. She screamed for him to stop, but he didn't listen. In an instant, he looped the rope around his neck, and before she could reach him, he was suspended in the air, taking his own life. She jolted awake with a terrified scream, her body shaking violently, gasping for breath, coughing and sobbing uncontrollably. She clutched her chest, crying out apologies in sheer panic. The next day, as they walked to school hand in hand, Yatsuha excitedly shared how she made an even tastier bento for him, happily squeezing his hand. Yu silently watched her blushing face and her overly affectionate nature, always touching, hugging, and holding his hand. It reminded him of their childhood when she was just the same, always clinging to him. As they approached the park where they used to play as kids, Yatsuha rushed in with excitement, but at the entrance, she tripped over something, losing her balance. Just as she was about to fall, Yu instinctively grabbed her from behind, steadying her. For a moment, she froze, her expression shifting unpredictably, blushing, then looking almost angry. Worried, Yu quickly apologized for the sudden hug, but with teary eyes, she expressed happiness instead. No one had ever hugged her before, and feeling her heart racing from the unexpected embrace, she struggled to calm herself. Watching her flustered reaction, Yu couldn't help but smile slightly for the first time. As he apologized again, she simply thanked him with a bright smile, and as a token of gratitude, hugged him back. Later, as they played while holding hands, Yu found himself sincerely wishing they could always stay like this. The next morning, Yu woke up to the chirping of birds, feeling a refreshing lightness he had never experienced before. Just then, a message from Yatsuha popped up, suggesting they walk to school together. The thought alone filled him with unexpected happiness. Jumping out of bed, he eagerly slid open his curtains, only to be surprised. Yatsuha was already outside, fully dressed and waiting for him. But something felt off. Her face looked sad. Worry settled in immediately. Wasting no time, he quickly got ready, grabbed his bag, and rushed to the door. The moment Yu stepped outside, Yatsuha greeted him with a bright, excited smile, her face glowing with a new kind of happiness. Without hesitation, she hugged him tightly, cutely showing off the breakfast she made for him, insisting he eat it on the way. Though grateful, Yu couldn't shake off his concern. Gently he asked, "Are you okay?" Her face tensed for a brief moment before she quickly masked it with a cheerful expression, brushing off his concern. Making breakfast for you was no trouble at all, she reassured him almost too quickly. Looking at her excited face, Yu hesitated, but convinced himself that maybe he had just imagined her earlier sadness. As they walked and chatted, they finally reached the train station. But the moment Yu stepped onto the platform, his expression shifted. His once relaxed face tightened with fear, and his hands instinctively clenched. His eyes scanned the area, and relief washed over him when he noticed that the usual troublemaker was absent, leaving only his two subordinates glued to their phones. Seeing Yu's tension ease, Yatsuha watched him with a soft, blushing smile. After leaving the train, they happily walked towards school when an unexpected voice called out to them. Startled, they turned to see a boy approaching with a bright smile, greeting them enthusiastically. Yu hesitated, confused by the sudden interaction, but Yatsuha's reaction was even stronger. Her grip tightened on her bag strap as if holding back her irritation. The boy, completely oblivious, continued greeting them, his excitement almost infectious. Blushing slightly, he directly addressed Yatsuha, mentioning how he hadn't seen her since elementary school. Instead of a harsh reaction, she simply laughed and casually asked for his introduction. as if she didn't recognize him at all. A flicker of disappointment crossed the boy's face, and with a small, dejected sigh, he introduced himself as Yamato, her good friend from elementary school. Upon hearing Yamato's name, Yatsuha's expression briefly changed, as if she was just now recognizing him. Then, with forced excitement, she suggested they all go to school together, calling him a true friend. Though she smiled, internally she struggled to control her frustration. Yamato, still grinning, expressed how happy he was for you, saying it was great that his childhood friend had transferred here. But as he turned his back to them, his expression momentarily shifted, as if cleverly concealing something. Then, facing Yu again, he feigned concern, bringing up how Yu was always bullied with a fake look of regret. He sighed, excusing himself for never being able to help, claiming his duties as a student council member kept him too busy. Yu, caught off guard by the sudden guilt-tripping, hesitated. Seeing his friend looking ashamed, he immediately waved it off with an innocent smile, genuinely thanking Yamato for at least thinking about him. Still maintaining his act, Yamato awkwardly waved his hand in the air as if embarrassed. Just as he reached to playfully pat Yu's shoulder, perhaps to further sell his sincerity, Yatsuha swiftly intercepted with a cold expression. She grabbed his wrist, stopping him before he could make contact. Noticing the shocked expressions on both boys' faces, Yatsuha quickly forced a smile and with sudden fake shock, exclaimed that there was a bug on Yu's hand, so she was just trying to remove it. Then she immediately apologized for the misunderstanding. Yu, still in shock from her sudden touch, simply smiled, unsure how to react. Yamato quickly waved him off with fake excitement, excusing himself by saying the student council members were waiting for him. Yatsuha, still forcing a cheerful act, nodded in agreement as he left. Once he was out of earshot, Yu glanced at her with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Yatsuha simply smiled cutely, reassuring him. "I'm fine, really." Meanwhile, on the other side of the school, Yamato rushed inside, visibly shaken by what had just transpired. His heart pounded as he locked himself inside a restroom stall, tears streaming down his face. Clutching the same hand Yatsuha had touched, he pressed it to his lips, whispering her name with wild, desperate affection. Seeing his phone wallpaper, a childhood picture of Yatsuha, Yamato blushed, overwhelmed with emotion. With a passionate kick, he reassured himself that fate had always destined Yatsuha to be with him, even from their elementary school days. Back when she transferred away, he had clung to the belief that they would meet again, convinced it was their fate. Now, seeing her again, he misinterpreted her presence as proof that she had come back just for him. Admiring her cuteness, he even convinced himself that her body had grown beautifully just for him alone. Lost in thoughts of her warmth when she held his hand, he shivered with desperation, hugging himself as a twisted desire to hold her took over. But then, recalling how she had been happily holding Yu's hand, his expression darkened. His mind raced back to childhood, where Yatsuha, perhaps by mistake, always ended up playing with Yu instead of him. Frustration boiled inside him as he remembered those moments, clenching his fists. He recalled how, even as a child, he despised Yu's presence. He had once crushed an insect under a stone and wished Yu would disappear, just like that, erased from Yatsuha's life forever. Yet despite those thoughts, Yu had always turned to him with a bright smile, inviting him to play along. Even while playing, all Yamato could do was plot ways to get rid of him. His mind spiraled further into twisted memories, recalling their middle school days. Back then, when those bullies tormented him, it was Yu who had stepped in, fearlessly confronting them. But instead of backing down, the bullies turned on Yu, beating him, mocking him, and making him their next target. The bullying escalated to such a cruel extent that Yu was nearly driven to take his own life. Watching Yu suffer in that darkness, Yamato had felt nothing but thrill and excitement. He wanted Yu to break, to give up, to disappear forever. But no matter how much pain Yu endured, he stubbornly clung to life, reading motivational quotes and forcing himself to keep going. This infuriated Yamato, so he devised a more insidious plan, determined to push Yu over the edge. He was the one who scribbled cruel, scolding, and demotivating messages on Yu's desk, wanting him to drown in despair. But when the new students noticed the bullying and started showing concern for Yu, Yamato acted fast, creating a fake account under Yu's name to manipulate and mislead everyone. He was also the one who filled Yu's locker with garbage, watching with sadistic satisfaction as Yu's anxiety and misery deepened. The more broken Yu looked, the more Yamato reveled in his triumph. Before Yatsuha returned, he had one goal: to make sure Yu never lived to see that day. Thank God. I don't have friends like him, but wait, I also don't have girlfriend. Oh, by the way. Yamato's fist tightened, his knuckles going pale as he pounded on the bathroom door, his breath ragged with anger. The recollections of Yu hanging out with Yatsuha were like a bad tattoo, etching his annoyance deeper. His fingers trembled as he recalled every moment she had spent by Yu's side, the way she smiled at him, the way she held his hand. Forcing himself to calm down, he wiped his face and stepped out of the restroom. His sudden return startled the student council members who had been wondering about his absence. They gathered around him with concern, questioning him about the missed meeting. With a composed expression, he brushed off their worries, fabricating an excuse to maintain his usual image. As Yamato engaged in conversation with his friends, his gaze shifted toward Yatsuha and Yu approaching from a distance. His eyes lingered on their intertwined hands, a flash of irritation passing through him before he quickly masked it with a bright smile. He greeted them with faint enthusiasm, his expression controlled as they walked past. His friends exchanged amused whispers, commenting on how well Yatsuha and Yu suited each other. Yamato's smile stiffened, his fingers curling slightly as a familiar frustration returned. Meanwhile, sensing his presence, Yatsuha instinctively tightened her grip on her bag, but forced herself to maintain a composed expression. She wasn't there to let emotions take over. She had a goal, and she wouldn't let anything distract her from it. In the classroom, Yatsuha, blushing, rested her hands on the table, disappointed that Yu's books weren't ruined. She had wanted to share hers again. Yu chuckled, amused, while jealous eyes glared at them. Suddenly, she hugged him, realizing she might be distracting him. When he reassured her, she embraced him again, softly confessing her love. But then her eyes caught the cruel insult scrawled on Yu's desk. Hypocrite, and worse. Her expression hardened without a word as she stood and stepped away, claiming she forgot a book on her way out. A student handed her a council report for Yamato. She approached him, pretending to be surprised that he was really on the council and admiring his handwriting. Yamato, flustered, proudly admitted he wrote it himself until she pointed out a spelling mistake. Hypocrite spelled wrong, just like on Yu's desk. Yamato froze, quickly faking concern and dismissing it as coincidence. She silently handed him the file, her fists clenching. She refused to forgive the person who had done this to Yu. Yamato kept his expression calm, forcing a smile as he watched her. He misinterpreted her ability to recognize his handwriting, seeing it as proof that they were destined for each other. The thought made him tremble with excitement. Without warning, he stood up and grabbed her arm. She tensed, frustration flashing in her eyes. He assumed her earlier excuse about the hug was a lie, that she had touched him on purpose. But she controlled her anger, pushed him away, and smiled, acting unbothered. "I'm glad you didn't write on Yu's desk," she said, then walked off. As she moved away, her smile faded, and her expression hardened as she struggled to contain her emotions. Returning to Yu, she sat beside him with a bright smile, casually saying she found her book at her desk. The lecture bell rang, and she lowered her head, hiding behind her book. Though she appeared focused, her mind was elsewhere, disappointed and helpless, unsure of how to make Yamato admit his guilt. As the bell rang for PE class, Yu stood outside the boys' changing room, feeling weak and disappointed that he wouldn't be with Yatsuha. To everyone's shock, she suddenly hugged him tightly, sniffling over their brief separation. When he gently moved her away to change, she looked up at him with flushed cheeks and teary eyes, reminding him of her deep love. "Even if the world disappeared, my love for you wouldn't change," she assured him. Yu was surprised by her devotion, but before he could respond, she noticed classmates entering the boys' changing room. With one last emotional wave, she led him behind her, her heart full of emotion. Now alone, Yu entered the changing room, feeling low as he got dressed. Yamato, peeking at him slightly, checked his phone, where messages praising his schemes appeared, fainting friendliness. Yamato greeted Yu with a cheerful expression. Yu, though surprised, genuinely thanked him for visiting, despite the risk of Yamato's friends disapproving. However, confusion set in when Yamato casually asked about Yatsuha. Seeing Yu's worried face, Yamato took his plan further. "You know, since Yatsuha should have sat with me on her first day, Everyone now sees her as weird, just like me. Yamato continued to plant seeds of doubt in Yu's heart, hinting that Yatsuha was being isolated despite her charm. The manipulative words took effect, making Yu's heart race with nervousness. You know, Yatsuha is attending physical education all alone, Yamato emphasized, his tone calm and insidious. It's not good for her. You should think about what's best for her happiness. Yu remained silent, his troubled expression revealing the turmoil within. The more Yamato spoke, the more anxious Yu became, his mind racing with thoughts of Yatsuha's well-being. Meanwhile, in the corridor, Yatsuha stood awkwardly in her uniform, looking like a fish out of water without Yu by her side. The girls excitedly opened the changing room door and instantly fawned over Satsuki's suave and dashing presence. However, their gossip came to a screeching halt when they spotted Yatsuha standing solo. While most of the girls decided to play it cool and ignore her, Satsuki, being the kind soul that she was, approached with friendly concern. "Hey, are you okay?" Satsuki asked, offering Yatsuha a spare set of gym clothes. Yatsuha eagerly accepted with a beaming smile, grateful for the gesture. But just as quickly, she revealed that she was playing hooky from gym class due to not feeling well. Satsuki, maintaining her composed kindness, offered to take her to the nurse's office if needed. Observing their conversation, Satsuki's group admired her calm and considerate nature. As Satsuki returned to her group, her friends expressed their surprise at her talking to Yatsuha, given her association with Yu and her odd reputation. However, Satsuki calmly explained that she was simply helping a new transfer student, not caring about others' opinions. Hearing her perspective, her group once again admired her composed and independent attitude. After confirming that all the girls were busy playing, Yatsuha's expression turned cold. She deliberately dropped her wallet in the gym before slipping into the storage room with a pair of pliers in hand. Her actions were filled with quiet intent as she silently tampered with the lock. In the post-gym class, Yatsuha wrapped Yu in a bear hug, overflowing with emotion. Despite her fondness for the class, she lamented not being able to lay eyes on him. Excitedly, she showed him her lunchbox and suggested they eat together. However, Yu looked troubled and distant, overwhelmed by the guilt planted by Yamato. When he hesitantly suggested eating separately, Yatsuha was shocked by his tense and depressed demeanor. "Yu, I made this meal for you," she said sweetly, her voice filled with sincerity. "It took a lot of effort, and I really want to eat together." After a moment of hesitation, he agreed, but as they ate, he was consumed by guilt, thinking about Yamato's words, that she might end up alone because of him. Despite her excitement and the delicious octopus she proudly showed him, he barely ate, lost in his depressive thoughts. Overwhelmed by the fear that she would suffer because of him, he once again contemplated ending his life. Noticing his absence and worried expression, Yatsuha immediately showed him a group of adorable octopus figures she had made, playfully suggesting, "You must be feeling lonely and sad about losing friends, just like this octopus group sticking together." Seeing his shocked expression, as if she had read his mind, she excitedly stood up and loudly guaranteed, "I will help you make lots of friends." She then explained that as a transfer student, she didn't have many friends yet, but she assured him that she would make friends quickly, and that he would be her friend too. When she suggested that he should also try making friends, Yu immediately declined, his expression nervous and intense. However, Yatsuha remained cheerful and calm, reassuring Yu that everything would be okay. With a bright smile, she suggested they focus on the food first, before worrying about making friends. Finally, he took a bite, and as he genuinely admired the deliciousness of the meal, Yatsuha burst into excitement and happiness, shouting with joy. While watching Yatsuha and Yu together, Satsuki's group grew curious about their conversation. However, Satsuki remained deeply engrossed in her phone, calmly eating her lunch. The group was shocked by her lack of interest in the so-called couple, as if their interactions held no importance to her. Every girl started admiring Satsuki's cold and composed personality, praising her ability to stay detached. One even recalled how Satsuki once carried half of her documents, further reinforcing her composed yet unexpectedly kind nature. Despite all the admiration, Satsuki showed no reaction. Her elegant and enigmatic presence only made her seem even more impressive in their eyes. At that moment, Satsuki's phone buzzed with a notification. Without hesitation, she stood up abruptly and rushed toward the door, casually explaining that her friend was calling her. As she left, her group exchanged curious glances, wondering about this mysterious friend of hers. Meanwhile, just as Satsuki exited, Yatsuha also excused herself from Yu, claiming she forgot something in the gym room. Without waiting for his response, she quickly walked away. On the other side, as soon as Satsuki stepped out, she scanned her surroundings attentively before breaking into a run, clutching her phone tightly. She searched desperately for a secluded place, somewhere she could be alone. Whatever she had just received seemed suspicious. Something she didn't want her friends to find out. Finally, upon entering the storage room, Satsuki immediately locked the door, only to freeze in shock as she noticed the broken lock. A flicker of unease crossed her face, but with no time to waste, she pushed aside her worries. Instead of closing the door fully, she rushed toward a hidden spot within the room, her breath unsteady as she settled down hastily, adjusting her phone and preparing for whatever urgent matter awaited her. As soon as the stream started, Satsuki's entire demeanor shifted. Her usual calm and collected aura melted away, revealing a side of her rarely seen. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and her cheeks flushed as she clasped her phone tightly, watching Tanam appear on the screen. His charming, elegant presence filled the stream, and with every word he spoke, her heart fluttered. Tears welled up in her eyes, overwhelmed with emotion as she listened to his smooth, captivating voice. When Tanam mentioned how streaming on weekends might be difficult for students due to their hectic schedules, Satsuki immediately, almost instinctively, dismissed his concern. Her voice was filled with unwavering excitement as she talked loudly to herself, gushing over him like a love-struck schoolgirl, completely unaware of her surroundings. In her moment of pure admiration, she didn't notice the slow creak of the storage room door behind her. Yatsuha, her expression cold and calculating, silently peeked inside, her sharp gaze locked onto Satsuki, observing every little detail. Satsuki watched the streamer with starry devotion, completely absorbed in his charm. She didn't notice Yu silently observing from a distance, his expression unreadable. Disappointment flickered in Yu's gaze as he took in the scene before him. Yatsuha had been tracking Satsuki, only to find her fixated on a streamer. Suspicion crept in as Satsuki finally sensed something off. Spinning around, she yelped, nearly dropping her phone. Scrambling for an explanation, she found Yatsuha calmly holding up a wallet. "I forgot this?" Yatsuha said innocently, and I peeked in after hearing a noise. Satsuki let out a startled scream, spinning around with wide, panicked eyes. Realizing the situation, Satsuki froze, her face crumpling as tears welled up, overwhelmed and helpless. She stood there, visibly shaken by the fear of being exposed. Yatsuha calmly stepped closer, gently patting her back and reassuring her with a soft smile that her secret was safe. Shifting to a more playful tone, Yatsuha curiously asked, "Why are you watching your favorite show in hiding?" Satsuki exhaled, hesitant but ultimately deciding to confide in her. Embarrassed, she admitted her deep obsession with anime and idols, a passion she had carefully concealed. "I'm not ashamed of loving them," she said, "but I dread disappointing my friends who admire my cool and composed personality." The thought of shattering their expectations weighed heavily on her, making her more anxious than the idea of simply being labeled an anime fan. Exposing this side of herself felt like a betrayal to the image they believed in, and that fear kept her trapped in secrecy. Yatsuha gently took Satsuki's hands, her calm presence radiating reassurance. Encouraged, Satsuki finally voiced the weight on her heart. "If I reveal my love for idols, I fear I'll disappoint my friends. But hiding it makes me feel like a fraud." Torn between loyalty to them and her own happiness, she began to resent herself for always prioritizing others over her true passion. Without hesitation, Yatsuha pulled her into a comforting hug. The warmth and acceptance broke the last of Satsuki's restraint, finally allowing her to let go. She buried her face in Yatsuha's shoulder, crying over the exhausting, tangled emotions she had carried alone for so long. Yatsuha gently assured Satsuki that she understood her worries completely. Just as Satsuki pulled away, curiosity flickering in her eyes, Yatsuha, her face slightly flushed, admitted with a shy smile that she too had an obsession. Satsuki's tension eased, her expression softening with intrigue. But the moment Yatsuha cheerfully announced that Yu was her love interest, Satsuki froze. "Wait, Yu?" Satsuki hesitated, her mind racing. Yatsuha brought up Yu's bullying and asked how Satsuki felt about the way others perceived her for being around him. For a moment, sadness flickered in Satsuki's eyes. She too longed for companionship. But then, in a sudden burst of determination, her expression hardened with unwavering resolve. "I don't care about weird looks or losing friends," she declared. "Staying by Yu's side is all that matters because he is my savior." Yatsuha blinked, momentarily stunned, caught between admiration and confusion. Seeing Satsuki's determination, Yatsuha decided to share a secret of her own. She quietly revealed that she was an orphan, raised without a family, and had spent most of her school life alone and depressed. "One day, at my lowest, I sat in a park drowning in loneliness until you appeared, holding a football, and simply asked me to play. That moment changed everything. Because of him, I found friends, excitement, and a reason to smile. To me, he is a hero." With renewed determination, Yatsuha declared, "No matter what, I will stand by Yu's side without caring about anyone else's opinions." Satsuki was deeply moved by Yatsuha's confession, inspired by her unwavering resolve. She decided to follow the same path, staying true to her love for Yu regardless of her friends' opinions. Feeling an unspoken bond, she finally raised her hand toward Yatsuha, smiling. Despite their different crushes, their struggles were the same. With newfound excitement, Satsuki happily introduced herself, and Yatsuha, equally thrilled, beamed with joy. For the first time, they both felt truly understood. Back in the lunchroom, Yu sat alone, lost in thought, until his eyes widened in shock. Satsuki and Yatsuha were walking together, laughing and chatting like old friends. The entire room fell silent, especially Satsuki's group, who stared in disbelief. As Satsuki approached her table, she casually declared Yatsuha as her friend. Her group was even more stunned when, without hesitation, she invited Yatsuha to join them for lunch. But when Yatsuha subtly signaled toward Yu, Satsuki simply smiled and encouraged her to enjoy her meal without a second thought. Yatsuha nearly skipped toward Yu and threw her arms around him in a passionate hug. Satsuki watched, speechless, seeing knots of joy on Yu's face. She realized that Yu wasn't just some outcast. He was someone who had once saved Yatsuha from her darkest moments. Gripped by curiosity, Satsuki sat back down with her friends and finally asked the question that had been lingering in her mind. Why was Yu bullied in the first place? Guys, that's for now. If you enjoyed this manga, leave a like and comment down below which part was your favorite.